Today, we have with us an eminent person as the guest of honor, Dr. Jayanti S. Ravi. I am happy to present her brief biodata. Dr. Jayanti S. Ravi has worked as Commissioner of Schools, Chairperson, State Board of Secondary Education, and till recently was the Commissioner for Higher and Technical Education in Gujarat. A nuclear physicist by training, she also has a master's degree in public administration from Harvard University and a PhD in technology enhanced education from the Maharaja Siaji University, Baroda. She has been a Mason Fellow and a Chevening Scholar. She studied at the London School of Economics and Political Science, United Kingdom, and is a visiting faculty at Harvard University and awarded with the prestigious Littauer Fellowship at Harvard Kennedy School. She has published in international journals and written case studies for IIM Ahmedabad. She has authored 2 books titled The Transforming Higher Education, a Multiversity Model, and Silver Lining, Insights into Gujarat. She has worked as the collector, Panch Mahals, and DDO Sabarkantha, and director, NAC in the Prime Minister's office. She has been a column writer with Frontline, a leading fortnightly and a performing vocalist in Indian music. Earlier this month, she has moved to the Labour Department as Commissioner of Labour. I now respectfully call upon the guest of honor of today's function, Dr. Jayanti S. Ravi, to deliver the first Sri Avinashilingam Memorial Lecture on Innovation and Creativity in Higher Education.
Good afternoon. Reverend Swamiji Suhitanandaji Maharaj, Swami Atmapriyanandaji, the Vice Chancellor of the Sri Ramakrishna Mission, Vivekananda University, Swami Abhiramananda, Brahmachari Paramartha Chaitanyaji, Dr. Adageshan, Dr. Muttaya, all the assembled monks, all the very dear students, those who are graduating and those who are yet to graduate after a year, and all the very special faculty members and members of the staff, the team who have played such an important role in nurturing all these young student graduates who are ready to graduate and step into this beautiful world outside and make their contribution and start afresh as people on a quest of knowledge, a journey of discovering themselves as they serve many others who are not as privileged as they are or as we are. I'm very happy to be here today. As we all know, I don't need to repeat this, but I think it's absolutely important to again reiterate the fact that the Sri Ramakrishna Mission has been doing wonderful work in so many parts of India and the world, and contributing in so many diverse sectors, and most importantly, nurturing human beings, making them great leaders who can in turn contribute and have a very huge positive snowballing and cascading effect on humanity at large. And it is indeed a matter of great privilege for me. I also feel humbled at the same time that I have been given this unique opportunity of being present here today and share my thoughts with all of you. I'm particularly happy that I'm speaking today to the graduating class of DMSE, the Department of Management and Special Education, as well as students who are graduating from the GAPE, as you call it, General and Adaptive Physical Education and Yoga. Today it's also a very special occasion, as was just explained to us by Swami Abhiramananda, that this is the first memorial lecture dedicated to the memory of one great son of India, Sri T.S. Avinashalingam, who was instrumental in making this whole university, conceived of it, conceptualized it, and didn't just stop it there, but actually made it happen. He's been a great son of India who was a freedom fighter, a great educationist, a Gandhian. As we all know, we heard a lot about his contributions. We also know that he is someone who brought and gave a place of primacy to Tamil education in this great state and the country. He was the one who started this culture of ensuring that the Tamil encyclopedia, both for grown-ups and for children, was actually given to the public. He also started an innovative movement for making this whole movement of reading libraries something which was accessible within the reach of a large number of people, and therefore opening up huge gates for them to explore the world of knowledge and through that the world around them. He was also very instrumental in getting the Tirukkural introduced as a part of the curriculum. Today, right at the outset, as we stand here, I would be failing in my duties if we do not begin this interaction with a very small prayer offered at the feet of Thakur, Sri Ramakrishna. Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine avatar varishtaya Shri Ramakrishnaya te namah. I also take this opportunity, since we're dealing with young teachers who are going to step out and teach and virtually sculpt and create many young human beings. And there is a very small Tiruppugal composed by Sri Arunagirinadhar. It's one of my favorites, and I thought I would begin also by singing a few lines from this Tiruppugal. Iravamal piravamal yanayal sadguruvaki piravaki tiramana peruvarvai taruvaye Kuramadai punarvone guhane sorkumaresha Aranalai puhalvone avinashi perumale. Now, as we begin this interaction, I want to request all of you seated here to close your eyes for a few seconds. You can sit straight and close your eyes. Let's try a small exercise. As you sit quietly, can you think and recall all the teachers that you came across in your life from the time that you can remember, starting with your own mother and father, all the teachers that came into your life till now? Can you remember at least one, recall at least one teacher who deeply influenced you, touched you, inspired you, and made a big difference to your life? If that is the case, can you raise your hand if you came across at least one teacher who changed your life, who transformed you? With your eyes closed, you can raise your hand. You can keep your hand raised if you came across at least one teacher in your life who influenced you. Thank you. With your eyes closed, there's another question that I would like to ask all of you. Possibly 15 years, 20 years from now, if there was a gathering of this kind, and if the people gathered there were asked to name a teacher who completely transformed them, touched their lives, inspired them, how many of you have faith that you would be remembered with great reverence and affection? Please raise your hand. Thank you. You may now open your eyes. This is a question that I think all of us, especially the young graduating students here who are stepping out from college today, can keep asking at a regular periodicity to themselves to see if we are really on the path of being a good teacher and trying to make a difference to the world of people, young children around us. And I'm sure all of us have experienced firsthand, both as a student sitting on the other side and oftentimes as a teacher standing on the other side of the class, that whenever a teacher gives, offers whatever he has with selflessness, I'm sure you've all experienced that the student is willing, rather absolutely happy, eager, ready to offer all that he or she has out of the inspiration that we provide. We can call it a sarvasva danam that the student actually engages in. And I'm very happy today that we saw quite a few hands go up. The rest of them probably were still battling with some intellectual thoughts that were crisscrossing your mind, trying to debate as to whether you really came across such a teacher or not. But I do hope and pray fervently that all of us are able to make a great impact on many lives, and I think that would be the best way of repaying the debt that Swami Vivekananda also speaks of. We've been educated at the cost of many poor people, and if this is one thing that we can do, I think it will be a great contribution to the country at large. Now, one of my childhood fantasies was to be a teacher. And I used to always dream, as a lot of you here who have joined the B.Ed course, whether it is in the area of children with special needs or in the area of physical education, I'm sure many of you had this desire, this aspiration, this ambition in life to be able to teach. And as a young person, for many of us, our teachers were our role models as well, at whom we looked up to them and tried to imbibe, even imitate, and try and pick up all those qualities that we found so attractive in them and try to actually improvise on it, adapt it to become better teachers. And when I look at all these teachers, there's several teachers that come to my mind too, from the time I was in school. But there's one particular teacher about whom I'd like to share here in some detail. This incident hardly happened about 4 to 5 years ago. Very recently, that is. I was on a short visit, an official duty in a place called Kurnool. Have all of you heard of Kurnool? Have you heard of a district called Kurnool? Where is it located? In which state of India is it located? Anybody? I would like one of the students to answer. Yes? Yes, please. we're slightly off. Anybody else would like to make a guess? Andhra Pradesh. Anyone here from Andhra Pradesh? Okay. So this was a small district place that I went to, and I was told that this place is very famous for 3 Ds. They said it's very famous for doctors. It's also famous for the dust that Kurnool has, and they also said it's very famous for donkeys. Apparently there were a large number of donkeys that would be roaming on the streets. Now when I went to this place to discharge my duties as an observer, and I would have enough time on my hands to do all my duty, and I was really wondering how is it that I would spend the early morning time and the evening in doing something constructive. And I was told on the second day of my visit, as I silently sat praying to the Lord, and I asked, what is the purpose of my coming here? Is there something special that I can get while I'm here as I perform my duties? And I was very surprised. I got a very prompt answer the next day. And I was told that there is a nonagenarian, there is somebody in his late 90s called Dr. Sripada Pinakapani Garu. He was a Padma Bhushan who was actually staying in Kurnool. I just want to give you this example to tell you what is actually possible for each one of us present here by just looking at some of the lives of the people around us. This was a man well in his 90s, right at the sunset of his life, and yet the sunset of his life was a very glorious, brilliant sunset, a beautiful evening as it were. I got a chance to go virtually every day, early in the morning or in the evening to him. He was a great integral personality, I should say, was a great son of India too. He had many fascinating dimensions to his personality. On the one hand, the prefix, the title, doctor, in front of his name, actually referred to the fact that he was a medical doctor who worked for a major part of his life as the medical superintendent and dean of the Kurnool Medical College and Medical Hospital. He was a very successful doctor too, and who had also done some active research work. He used to regularly read medical journals such as Lancet, which are very famous, very, very high quality journals. He would also contribute and write to them. In addition, he was also a very good musician, a vocalist. He was also a musicologist who has composed a very large number of songs. He has composed and set to tune a large number of kritis of different composers ranging from Annamacharya to several others. But what was also surprising was that this was a man, how many of you here are graduating from physical education, from GAPI, the faculty of, how many of you are seated here? Can you raise your hand, those of you from physical education? Excellent. Would you be surprised to know, thank you, that this gentleman that I'm referring to was also a very avid tennis player, cricketer, and he was also a bodybuilder who believed in having a very strong and a good physical body as well. So he was someone who was all this rolled into one. And I still recall that even as he was completely bedridden, in a state where he could not even get up for the basic nature's call and so on, he had to be completely bedridden. And yet he had a mind which was absolutely brilliant, sparkling, and he would teach me various nuances, and often exacting. He would not tolerate any imperfection in what was being rendered, also short-tempered at times. But I think some of the qualities I saw in him were the hallmark of a great teacher, someone who believed in giving unconditionally with no expectation except your complete sincerity and your complete dedication to whatever was being given to you. So this was one example of a teacher who I thought pushed himself to areas beyond what we would call human limits in various dimensions. And this is something that I would like all of you graduating students to often remember. We all have heard of a terrible illness which is plaguing our entire education system. Have you heard of it or not? There's an educational illness which is plaguing our system now, which is often referred to as Macaulaytis. Have you all heard of this? It believes that we all have to be unidimensional monsters. And I think it is time we actually believed in the integrality of the human being, where you need a personality which is developed on various dimensions. You have to have the physical dimension also to be very well endowed. You have to keep in good and great physical health. You should also have an intellect which is very sharp, focused, which is also able to appreciate the detailed nuances of aesthetics, which is ethically very high and also extremely rational. And we also, above all of these, I think it's important that we cultivate that spirit of compassion, of harmony, where we can actually coexist with all of us, and most importantly with our own selves. I think Swami Vivekananda has very, very nicely explained the need for synthesizing our head, heart and hand in all that we do. And this is something that if we can try and get into every activity, virtually every class in which we engage with our students, if it's possible to be conscious of this and make the experience of active learning, not a passive teaching one, but an active learning experience where the student's curiosity is kindled and we're actually able to synthesize their psychomotor skills and all the different aspects of their personality. I think this will absolutely then make a deep imprint in their consciousness and help each personality to bloom, to blossom, to grow to its full and fullest, and not really be a poor imitation of something that is being told to them. And we'll be moving away from this whole system of regurgitating and vomiting, of memorizing alone that our education system today has come to be. And I often feel that we need young people like you to actually carry a big sledgehammer and break three things that have come to strangulate our education system today. One is the system of fixed, rigid curricula. Sometime back, when I did my doctoral thesis, I asked a lot of young people, and especially if we gave them choices within corridors. One is not talking of giving them unbridled, limitless choices, but if we gave them some choices and the freedom to choose, I think the sense of ownership, the sense of agency, the sense of actually wanting to do something, and their aspiration would be honed. And therefore it's very important that we do not have a fixed, rigid curriculum. We could have outcomes and certain competencies that we want the children to get, but the how of it, how do they want to learn, where do they want to learn? Is it in imprisoned classrooms that tend to imprison them, suffocate them, or do they want to be out in the open? Would they like to be in a laboratory playing with various models? I think all these are the choices that we must give them. The other thing that I think we must stop, and I've already given a hint of it, is that we must use the sledgehammer also to break the system of lecturing alone, which is a system of passive teaching that has come to plague most of our classrooms. Can we have systems of active learning where actually students are involved in teaching, having small project work, seminars, discussions, and so that the process of learning becomes more engaging and involves them. The third thing that I think we must completely try and move away from is this system of examinations in its current form. This is not to say that we don't need to assess or measure the level of learning that students have done, but if we can move it away from mere information regurgitation and have children be able to actually think, apply what they've learned, if we can gauge their understanding, their critical thinking, their higher order thinking skills, I think it will be a big step forward, and it is certainly possible. There are several innovative practices of this kind that have been tried out in many parts of India. In Gujarat too, we have tried of several such models. And I've got a small book today, which the Gujarat Educational Innovations Commission has brought out, and I'll be very happy to share it and leave a copy of it with this university for all of you to be able to read it and appreciate the nuances in it. As we move further, there's another great educational innovator of India. Gujarat has actually set up an Educational Innovations Commission, and this commission is based on 5 great educational innovators of India, most of whom lived during the independence movement or even before that. And who are these 5 great luminaries? One of them, of course, is Swami Vivekananda. We also have Sri Aurobindo, who goes on to say that a teacher uses every method and no method, which says that the spontaneity in the classroom should never be compromised. A teacher should not really come and repeat what has been tried out by him or her 20 times, 30 times, and again dish it out for the class, but it should be something new that is created spontaneously in each interaction, so that the process of actually helping the student learn something is indeed new and has a refreshing color to it. The other luminary that the Educational Innovations Commission talks of is Mahatma Gandhi, who set up this whole system of Nai Talim. In Gujarat, you do have institutions which were set up under this philosophy, where he gave a great deal of emphasis on community living, on actually synthesizing the head, heart and hand, where he believed that you must have compassionate human beings. Swami Dayananda Saraswati is also one of them, and who can forget the great experiment of Shanti Niketan that Sri Rabindranath Tagore as well was instrumental in actually conceptualizing and implementing. So these are the 5 great luminaries whose methods have been referred to in the Educational Commission's Innovations Act of the state. But it also gives a lot of hope and freedom to those educational innovational institutions who want to try out something new. It doesn't matter, they do not have to conform to the curriculum of the Gujarat board or the central board. They can actually design their own curriculum as long as it has some solidity to it, some rigor to it, but ensures that the outcomes are not compromised and students with all-round capabilities are actually sculpted. Now, as we move further, there's another small, since there are students here who will be dealing with young children, well, I've been asked to speak on creativity and innovations in higher education. I also am conscious of the fact that all of you are going to be young teachers and that you will be dealing with young students. And there's a story that I'm very fond of. I was wondering if I could share the story with all of you. Several decades, perhaps many years ago, there was a young boy called Farid. Now this young boy came from a royal family, and given that he belonged to a royal family, his mother was very concerned and apprehensive that the boy should not go wayward, and wanted him to be on the path of truth, as was said so beautifully. Today we recited some verses from the Taittiriya Upanishad, isn't it? So Satyam Chara, so that was the spirit in which this mother of this young boy called Farid also wanted this boy to be on the right path, the path of truth, the path of compassion. And since he belonged to a Muslim family, the mother would urge this boy every day to carry out his ibadat, prayers. And when he completed his prayers, she would actually, you can call it bribe him or reward him with a small piece of candy from the time he was a little boy. And she would place this candy in front of him, I'm also saying this because I am given to understand that about 40% of the students who have enrolled in many of these courses are parents themselves. Am I right? I'm told a lot of the students here, young student teachers, also happen to be parents who have come here because you too have children who have a special need, and you've come here to equip yourself, fortify yourself with the skills needed to deal with such children in a very nice, compassionate, harmonious way at home. So this young Farid, his mother was a very well-meaning woman, a very well-meaning parent. So she would try and smuggle in a small piece of candy every day as he recited his prayers with his eyes closed. And when he finished his prayer, the small piece of candy would be discovered by the child. And the mother would tell him that this has actually been given to you by the Lord Almighty. He believed this for many, many years, and this practice went on without a single gap. And there's finally one day when this boy is praying. As he's praying, for some reason, the mother is not in a position that day to actually smuggle in a piece of candy. As this happens, she's very distraught. She fervently prays to the Lord and tells him that, look, all these years, I admit that I said a lie. I told the child that he gets this piece of candy from you, but I said it so that he would actually have this discipline of praying for you and that his faith would be unshakable. Whatever happens today, please take care and please ensure that his faith in you is not destroyed. She makes this deep prayer fervently from the bottom of her heart. And as she just finishes it, the young Farid gets up and starts walking towards the mother. He today has a special light in his eyes. He walks to her with a little smile on his face. And the mother is all confused. She thinks that, well, he's going to come and question her today and rationally speak to her and say that, well, you've been fooling me all these years. But as the magic, the logic of the infinite is magic for all of us, as Sri Aurobindo used to say, there is a certain magic that happens on the phenomenological plane, which is actually divine logic. The child on that day actually sees a blue light, a beautiful light as he closes his eyes for prayer, which is far sweeter than any possible sweet or candy that the mother could have given him. Who was this? Who was this young boy Farid? Any guesses? He actually grows up to be a great Sufi saint called Baba Farid, after whom there's a town even today in Punjab called Faridkot, which is named. And in fact, he sings a Shabad to say that Sabbe Vastue Mithya Rabbe Pochan Tudda Shakkar Khand Nivat Gud Makhyo Mazya Dudh. What he means is that whether it is jaggery, sugar, honey, or all of these, they are sweet to a point. But after a point, when you've actually tasted the sweetness, the really sweetness of the divine, all these sweetnesses pale into insignificance. And I think this again teaches all of us that when anything is done with this word called sincerity, the mother possibly did lie, but when she did it with the best of intentions and sincerity, I think everything is perfectly all right, as has been said, as we just heard about Sri Aurobindo's words, that a teacher uses every method and no method. I also want to share with you a few experiences that I had when I used to teach postgraduate students quantitative techniques and empirical methods at Harvard University. I was teaching a class of PG students, and I must share this great experience that I had with all of you to tell you the joy that you can get from actually connecting to students. This was a class of postgraduate students. I had also gone there as a postgraduate student. I had just completed my PG. And I found that while I was teaching them the basics of quantitative techniques. Any of this teaching that we do is probably only a bridge to be able to actually connect with the other human being that you're seeking to engage with. And I can share several instances where I found the students in class, they would not be able to understand some topic, but when we really delved deep into it and tried to address it with different examples, different metaphors, different examples from different contexts, you found that there was a special connection that you actually developed with your students. You could virtually see their eyes lighting up. And when that happened, you felt several barriers had been broken and you could actually experience that special joy of oneness. There was one such girl in my class. She was actually a very senior government official who was working in Florida in one of the animal husbandry departments there. And I still remember I was teaching her this concept of mathematical concepts of limits. And as I was teaching, I found that she was repeatedly asking some questions. There was something which was an obstruction between her and this concept of limits. There was something which was coming in the way of her understanding it. And while one was patiently trying to address the doubts, a point came when I felt that if I was to go on addressing her doubts in the class, the speed and pace for the rest of the class may get compromised. So I said that let's meet in the coffee break after this class, and I carried on with the rest of the class and was able to make satisfactory progression that day on the topic. But as a sensitive teacher, we have to have our eyes and ears open. A little later in the class, I noticed that she walked out of the class. When she entered the class back, I could sense that her eyes were red. She must have cried. There was something that was troubling her. And immediately after the class, when I invited her to my room and we sat over a cup of tea and some cookies, she started explaining, and she still had some doubts about limits. And then it turned out that when she was a young girl of about 8, she had lost her mother, and her father had decided to then take her to Germany so that they could start life afresh. And when she went there, this concept of limits in German is referred to as Limes, I believe. So she said this was being taught to me at that time, and I never understood it. Possibly the trauma of having lost her mother and something which was within her had been touched that day. And as she explained this whole issue, this whole instance of her life incident, as she relived it, and then got to understand the concept of limits and what is it that we are talking about mathematically when we talk of the simple concept of limits, I think there was a great deal of healing as well that happened to her. And I think these are equally important as a teacher. If we are all compassionate, open, sensitive to our students, I think it will help us actually forge a bond with them and help them develop an enduring love for whatever they do in life. And as somebody has said, the very meaning of the word education is to be able to, the process, it is probably the process of knowing oneself and the universe around us and being able to harmoniously deal with the two. I think this is one of the definitions of education, and therefore I think this concept of harmony, there's an interesting saying that the French Revolution talked of 3 very important words: liberté, égalité, and fraternité, which means liberty, equality, and fraternity. But as they say, it's fraternity which has probably got to be the central flagpole of the entire fabric of a nation or of a state, a community, a society, or a home. If it is just based on equality, we've seen what happens to a purely communist nation. We've seen what happens. That alone is not sustainable. Or if we just talk of liberty, we've seen what has happened even in a country which was the champion of liberty like the United States of America. But if fraternity is the enduring flagpost on which these other values are also attached, I think we can achieve great, significant progress. And this is where Swami Vivekananda's thoughts on being able to harmonize and balance, straddle between the ancient wisdom that we have and the modern practices, the scientific practices, the outlook that the West has. If we can actually synthesize the two, harmonize the two, we would be able to achieve great, great, significant strides. On that note, I'd like to once again congratulate all of you for having spent this time in a course which is not very often understood by a lot of people as being very necessary. It's a slightly, shall I call it an exotic course or a different course. These are not courses that the run-of-the-mill students run to. The herding tendency doesn't happen for these programs. You've actually come here, which means there was something special in you, which actually prodded you, goaded you to come here and join as a student here, which means you have a great deal of sensitivity in you, compassion to be able to take this as a lifelong career. There are several instances of people who have completely transformed and empowered people like this. There is, of course, I don't need to talk about it, you all would have come across the instance of the great Helen Keller. As you know, she was born in 1880. There's a very interesting incident that happens in 1888. She talks about the summer of 1888, when for the first time, till then, just as we talk of a touch pad, the only touch pad that she had was this and her fingers. She couldn't hear, she couldn't see, her speech was also completely not developed. Later on, with great difficulty, she would actually feel the lips of her teacher, Anne Sullivan, and feel her throat with her fingers and try and replicate, emulate those sounds. So through this little touch pad, which was her only window to the entire world of objects, thoughts, ideas, expressions, she remembers that on a particular day, as she was walking to the lamp house, there was a water hose, and when she felt water and the spelling of the word water, she started connecting, and that was a very romantic phase of her life, where she tried to relate the spelling or the words, shabd and arth, as we say, for so many words and concepts, that she had a very, very accelerated phase of learning. And of course, a person like her, well, in those days when there was absolutely no facility of this kind, if a lady of that kind, a child with all these debilitating disabilities, could actually go on to become a graduate at the age of 19, she wrote several books of her own and was a political activist who traveled to so many countries across the world that even someone like Mark Twain remarked that possibly Napoleon and Helen Keller were two of the most impressive personalities of that whole century. I think each one of the students who comes in contact with you, there can be an alchemy that you can actually activate. You can be instrumental, like Anne Sullivan, in getting your students to actually go and play a transformational leadership role in the world, in spite of, notwithstanding the special challenges and abilities that they come with. So once again, I'd like to congratulate all of you for taking this program, successfully completing it, and today being on the threshold of actually stepping into the world. And as we complete, I also want to recite a small prayer which is composed by Paramacharya, and this is on the spirit of fraternity that we all always speak of. This is a famous song called Maitrim Bhajata, and I'll stop with this. If any of you knows it, you're most welcome to join in to the song as well. Maitrim Bhajata अखिलहृजेत्रीं मैत्रीं भजत अखिलहृजेत्रीम् आत्मवदेव परानपि पश्यत आत्मवदेव परानपि पश्यत युद्धं त्यजत स्पर्धां त्यजत त्यजत परेष्वक्रममाक्रमणं मैत्रीं भजत अखिलहृजेत्रीं जननी पृथ्वी कामदुधास्ते जनको देवः सकलदयाळु दाम्यत दत्त दयद्वं जनता दाम्यत दत्त दयद्वं जनता श्रेयो भूयात् श्रेयो भूयात् श्रेयो भूयात् सकलजनानां मैत्रीं भजत अखिलहृजेत्रीम्. Thank you very much. Namaste.